Okay, Slashaholics, here's another installment of my self-written Friday the 13th story, Quarantine. Like I said before, it's kind of an Elseworlds thing. If dates don't match up, certain things are different than the canon. It's all in fun, it's in its own universe, and I hope you enjoy it. Friday the 13th Quarantine by Joshua LaRue. Chapter 3. An Eye for an Eye. Outside the walls of Camp Crystal Lake, the horde of Trioxites that had been stalking the group for over 2 weeks hadn't given up, and their numbers grew as the smoke from Jason's shack burning rose into the air, attracting more of the undead. As the number of the horde pushing against the wall grew, the 2 trees meant to hold the wall closed began to ever so slightly move through the dirt and snow. Only a little, for now. Harry, Mark, and Janine watched Kevin heading off on a side trail away from the cabin, singing to himself, as they made their way back into the woods following the snowy trail that led to Campsite C in the Crystal Lake docks. "Dad, something isn't right with this place. Tom is keeping something from us. I mean, why would they wall up such a big part of a forest and lake?" Mark asked his father.
"Indeed, and believe me, when we get everything settled tonight, he is going to give us some answers. I may only be a retired firefighter, but those stamps on the watchtowers that said OP-CL-JV look very much like military markings. And that graffiti," Harry began. "Camp Blood, you mean?" Janine added. "Exactly," her father agreed. "And don't forget that stuff about someone they called Maggot Head rotting in hell. At the time, I was just glad we found a place to protect us from the horde, but the more I think about that graffiti, the more I get worried that something went on here that was so bad they walled it off," Mark said. "What do you think it could be?" Janine asked worriedly. "I honestly do not know, but I promise you both on your mother's grave, we will find out when we get back to the cabin, one way or another," Harry promised. The 3 walked in silence for what seemed like forever, as a light snow began to fall and they came out into a clearing with what used to be a large cabin to their left, but was now a burned-out shell. To their right, they saw a large billboard that was so faded and weathered they could no longer read it. Behind it was what appeared to be a large construction site, abandoned. There was rebar and old propane canisters all around, and piles of scaffolding that seemed to have been knocked down quickly. Harry glanced around in front of them and saw a dock that was partially broken and charred, and nearby a large gas or diesel tank that had obviously exploded at some point in the past. There was also old tattered and faded police tape tied to some of the old scaffolding and what was left of the charred cabin. Janine put her arm around her dad's waist and hugged him close. "Dad, I'm scared. What happened here?" she asked, not wanting to look anymore. Her father responded solemnly. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I've seen a lot of things as a firefighter, and I know this was a gigantic explosion of some kind. It almost looks like the cabin had caught on fire and spread to the tank. But the way the dock is charred, I could almost bet someone spread an accelerant across it. Probably the fuel from that old tank. Regardless, this was most likely not a military exercise." Harry didn't mention that he also saw multiple areas that looked like old bloodstains in the wood on the dock and by the cabin. "What the hell is this place?" Mark asked. "We're gonna find out, son. It's time the senator spills the beans on this place. If we are to be staying here for a while, we need to know everything. No more letting him put it off. Let's see if we can find anything useful here and then get back," their father remarked. After surveying the area and walking the dock that remained on the frozen lake,
Harry noticed something barely visible behind the burned-down cabin, almost completely covered by trees and overgrowth. It was a small water tower. Harry hoped they had lucked out.
"Kids, come with me," he barked.
The three made their way past the charred remains of the cabin and walked through the overgrowth and came upon the base of the water tower. Harry saw a hose coming from the left side bottom of the tower. He followed it with his eyes and saw a nozzle with a turn pump handle. Harry lifted it in his hands and turned the small crank multiple times, and a small bit of water spat out of the nozzle of the hose. And then a moment later, water began to stream out of it at a surprisingly high pressure. The light snow was beginning to come down harder. Harry knew they needed to hurry. The storm was not far off now.
"Mark, get the bottles out of your bag. Let's fill them up. This kind of pressure tells me this tower is pretty full. No telling how long it's been sitting in that tower. We will need to boil it, but let's take all we can carry for now. We can get more after the storm is over," Harry ordered.
"Yes, sir," Mark responded, and went about taking his backpack off and unzipping it and pulling out 5 collapsed 2-liter bottles. The 3 of them filled them each up and put 3 in Mark's backpack and 2 in Janine's. Harry had hoped they would find some extra clothing, bedding, or even food, but they still hadn't completely explored the cabin they were staying in. Perhaps there would be some supplies there, and hopefully a pot they could boil the water in. The one thing he knew for sure was they weren't finding anything in the burned-down cabin, and the storm wasn't going to give them any extra time to explore the campgrounds further, this evening or night. Harry and his teenage son and daughter began their trek back to the large cabin where the rest of their group was waiting. Jason had made his way up the bank of Crystal Lake, looking for more invaders, more outliers who had come into him and Mother's home and killed her, taken her away from Jason forever. Something told him the one he had killed was not alone, and now he knew he was right. Jason saw from a distance 3 more of them. They were filling water bottles next to the cabin and dock where he had fought the Nightmare Man, the one who had overpowered Jason in his dreams and given him one of the hardest fights of his life right here on that dock. It had taken Jason a long time to heal and regenerate after that battle. Jason had collected 2 trophies from that day. One was the glove of blades he had tied to a belt around his waist, along with several other knives before setting his shack ablaze. The other trophy was the Nightmare Man's head, a head Jason got tired of hearing talk, so he had made a large pike and placed the head atop it in the woods to forever witness Jason as the victor, and be a reminder that no one came into Jason's woods and left. As the group of 3 finished filling their bottles and zipping up their packs, Jason decided patience was more important than wrath. If there were even more outliers, then these 3 would lead him to them. So Jason watched, his rage and anger boiling, and when they began their walk away from the dock, Jason followed. Two hours had passed since Kevin and the Millers had went on their respective journeys into Crystal Lake, and evening was here and night would soon follow. The snow was starting to come down harder outside the large frosted window on the front of the cabin where Senator Tom Wilcox, Ron and Dorothy Savinsky, and the twins Adrian and Sally Ann waited. The twins were currently in the cleanest of the 3 sleeping quarters and were actively dusting and rearranging and shaking out old bedding, preparing the room for their group to have a place to camp down for the night once the fire was going in the main room. Tom and the Savinskys were chatting in the kitchen area when Ron noticed the Millers in the distance making their way back towards the cabin.
Well, there they are. Now where is that boy with the wood? I am awfully cold, Ron complained.
The group were all dressed for winter the best they could. They were still wearing what they had on when the base had been overrun, an assortment of long johns covered by jeans, sweaters, jackets, and the like. But the temperature outside was pushing 0 and was dropping by the minute. They needed a fire soon or they were going to have a serious problem.
Honey, that boy has a name. It's Kenny, Dorothy chided her husband.
Kevin, Tom corrected.
Excuse me?
Ron questioned.
It's Kevin. His name is Kevin.
The senator was cut off as Harry came charging through the front door into the main room. His face was stern and serious, and all his attention was directed straight towards the senator.
Welcome back. Have you lot seen Kevin? He should have been back with the wood by now, surely, Ron said.
Shut up, Ron. If you want it that bad, go get some yourself. Right now it's time for the gentleman from New Jersey to start talking. We saw the crime scene, Senator. There was police tape, evidence of an arson that caused a serious explosion. Something big went on down there, and I have a feeling it happened not long before these walls went up. What is this place? How do you know about it? And are we safe here? Harry demanded.
Janine and Mark had walked into the cabin shortly after their father and were watching the exchange intently.
Mr. Miller, I assure you I will explain everything, but should we not first wait for our dear friend Kevin to return with the firewood? And get a nice warm fire going so we can all...
No, Mark interjected.
My dad asked you some questions. Quit stalling.
I've got this handled, Mark. But he's right, Tom. The time for answers is now. We can fill Kevin in when he gets back. I'm sure he's probably just making sure we got enough wood to last through the storm. No more excuses, no more waiting. We need to know, what is this place? What is OP-CL-JV? Harry demanded.
Tom could tell his time was up. They weren't going to let him buy any more time, so he decided to answer their question. For the most part. It stands for Operation Crystal Lake. JV is some other military jargon that would bore you. The Senate Oversight Committee, which I sat on, was briefed on some projects the military had brewing before the Trioxin fell. And when Fort Dix fell, and it looked more and more like we weren't going to get out of New Jersey anytime soon, let alone to Illinois, I shifted us in the direction of this place because I knew it had huge walls and shelter. I got us here, didn't I? We are safe from that horde, aren't we? I think that buys me some good goddamn faith if I do say so myself, Tom snided.
You got us here? You got us here? No, Senator, we got you here. Lots of our group died getting you here, apparently. Harry interjected. And obviously, this is a military operation. But what were they up to? What is the crime scene that my kids and I just saw? Why did the military choose this place? Talk, Tom.
Adrian and Sally Ann were in the process of cleaning the sleeping quarters and preparing it for the group when they heard the front door open and Harry speaking in a loud, authoritative voice. Then they heard him tell Ron to shut up.
Oh, I don't want to miss this, Adrian said with a smile on her face. She then added, the fireman is finally going to stick it to Thurston Howell and the senator. Come on, if Tom tries to bullshit anymore, we can tell them about the folder. Go ahead, I'm going to finish up in here. Besides, sounds like I'll be able to hear the whole thing from back here anyways. But if I miss anything, fill me in, okay? Sally Ann responded. Okay, sis, but you're missing out on all the fun. Or are you just missing your secret lover? Adrian said. Shut up. Now you better hurry, you'll miss the juicy parts, Sally Ann insisted. Fine,
"Your loss," Adrian said as she left the room, shut the door, and made her way to the argument that was brewing between Harry and Tom in the main room. Sally Ann was straightening up one of the twin-size beds along the wall when she heard a slight tink at the small window on the far side of the room. She jumped, startled, but then a smile came across her face as she saw a small pebble hit the frosted snow-covered window, followed by another tink sound. Her thoughts automatically went to Kevin. Usually Kevin wouldn't be her type. She was more into a bookish guy than a jock, but at the end of the world, beggars can't be choosers, and on a run a week after the base fell, the two of them volunteered to hit an old canning factory to look for any supplies, and one thing led to another. And even though they only found a small box of canned vegetables in the whole ransacked place, they also found a new favorite pastime that took at least 2 people and definitely helped them stay warm during the cold winter. They began volunteering for similar runs any chance they got, but once that fucking cock-blocking horde started stalking the group, their alone time was kaput. She had wanted to volunteer to go with Kevin to get the firewood, but considering the chore at hand, thought it would be a bit too obvious, and they didn't want the whole group knowing their business. Yet. She had hoped he would hurry back so they could make some sort of excuse to be alone together, and now it looked like he was back and saw a chance for them to have a little fun. Sally Ann went to the bedroom door and locked it quietly, and then walked across the room and struggled as she opened the frosted window. Cold air immediately blasted her, sending shivers over her body. Her nipples hardened, though she wasn't sure if it was the cold or the thought of Kevin and her christening one of the beds early. The snow was falling pretty hard now, and it was pretty much dark outside. She wasn't sure of the time, but it was definitely late, and the storm was definitely close. She leaned out the window and whispered loudly, "Kevin, is that you? Come on, we got time for a quickie if you hurry." There was no reply. She looked left and right, but between the darkening evening and the snow it was hard to see anything. "Come on, Kevin. This isn't the time to be cute. Look what you're missing," she said as she slowly pulled off her thick turtleneck sweater and unfastened her bra and dropped them both to the floor, revealing her petite breast, her nipples like steel as the cold air hit her naked torso. There was still no response, and she was beginning to get irritated. She could still hear the argument from the main room, but knew time was of the essence and didn't feel like playing games right now. Not to mention she was freezing her tits off. "Okay then, guess you'll just have to wait," she said, and turned around and began to bend over to pick up her bra and sweater when she saw the room get slightly darker and sensed him standing behind her at the window. "Oh, you've come to your senses, have you? Good, because I was beginning to think that I was going to have to take care of things myself." She didn't have time to turn around or to finish her sentence as a large, grimy hand came from behind her outside the window and covered her mouth tightly, stifling her words or her screams as she quickly realized that it was not Kevin's hand over her mouth or his arm that was now pulling her through the window outside into the snow. Her naked back was held against a clothed torso of a very large figure. She strained to look up, and when she did, she tried to scream again as she saw a battered hockey mask covering the face that belonged to the most evil, hateful pair of eyes she had ever seen in her life. Sally Ann fought and kicked and struggled, but it was no use. Jason had her, and to her horror she saw Jason's other arm reaching above them both, his equally grimy free hand slowly reaching for a large icicle from the many that hung from the gutters of the old cabin. She could only watch in terror as the large man broke off the biggest of the icicles above them and held it in his hand. He brought his hand down slowly, holding the icicle out in front of her face. She saw the sharp point of the icicle move slowly towards her left eye. She tried to move her head. She tried to scream for help, but Jason had her in a death clutch. He was too strong. She felt an icy pain spread across her eye as the point of the icicle punctured her pupil. The pain grew more intense, and she felt a large pop. And then, as the fight left her, and her struggling began to dissipate, and as she prayed for her suffering to end, she felt a searing, intense, stabbing pain, and then darkness, as her prayer was answered. Chapter 4, Revelations. Okay, listen. From what I understand, this campground has a sordid history. A long time ago, 1958, a kid drowned here, and then 2 counselors were brutally murdered, and the camp was closed down. But in 1980, it was going to be reopened, and the mother of the boy who drowned ended up being the murderer of the 2 counselors before. She returned to the campgrounds and killed all the counselors and the new owner of the campgrounds, Tom began. So she was arrested? Mark asked. Adrian was leaving Sally Ann to clean at this time and quietly came down the hallway and entered the room and stood against a wall, arms crossed, listening. No, 1 counselor survived and killed the mother in self-defense, Tom answered, and made a motion of running his thumb across his neck. Cut off her head. But soon after, all kinds of psychos started using these campgrounds as a killing field. Copycats and crazies, and the place got a bit of a reputation and became a legend in this area. Camp Blood, Janine said quietly. Yes. The town even tried changing its name, but it didn't stop the killings. So I assume the authorities got tired of it, and the military stepped in and just saw this place as a good place to do exercises and stuff like that, Tom replied.
But we saw caution tape and the remains of a large explosion and a huge fire. I didn't want to tell my children this, but I saw multiple bloodstains in the wood of the dock in the cabin. Don't forget, Tom, I am a retired firefighter. That fire might not have happened super recently, but it can't have been more than a few years ago. Why would there be police tape and bloodstains put up in a military facility? Wouldn't they handle it internally? Harry asked.
Look, perhaps there was an accident and they had no choice but to include the police. I have told you what I know, Harry. I saw pictures from the exterior. I knew that they walled up the entire campgrounds and a large portion of the woods and lake, and when the Trioxin fell, I kept it all in the back of my mind, in case things at Fort Dix or Illinois didn't work out. It's not ideal to be here alone in such a small group. I'd much rather still have what's left of the military watching over us like at the base, but at least we have safety and security here. The undead are stuck outside and we are here. Let's make the best of it, yeah? Tom pleaded, hoping they would leave it at that and end their interrogation.
When this storm passes, I want us all to do a walk of the perimeter and be sure the wall is secure all the way around. Plus, we need to immediately go shore up the section of wall we came through. We need to reinforce that area first and foremost. The kids and I found a water tower down by the dock. We brought back a few liters, but I think there is enough in that tower to last a while. We can resupply as needed for now, Harry said. He still had some questions and reservations, but felt the senator had told the extent of what he knew, so he dropped it and decided he'd make the best of it tonight, and first thing after the storm, he would go on to work, making damn sure they were all indeed truly safe.
He wanted security for his kids, a place they could live in peace, and this place may very well fit that bill, he decided. He knew it had been hard on Janine and Mark having to watch their mother, his wife Allison, pulled down, attacked, and devoured by that walking skeletal humanoid trioxite that crawled from that barrel that they had found in an abandoned warehouse on their way to Fort Dix. Harry had tried to save her, but that thing that came out of that godforsaken barrel wasn't like the others he had seen. It was a monster, a corpse covered in a blackish slime, its huge eyes never closing, no lips over its huge teeth, an undead monster with a grotesque grin. It grabbed her ankle and pulled her to the ground, and was biting into her before he or any of them could stop it. And then her screams had attracted nearby trioxites, and Harry, Mark, and Janine had to hide and wait until they had finished devouring Allison, and left before they could all move on. No kid should have to see their mother's life taken, let alone in such a violent, disgusting manner. And after the base fell to the trioxites, all Harry wanted was some sense of normalcy for his kids, and damn it, he was going to make it happen for them. It sure is coming down hard out there, isn't it? I really do wonder what is taking that boy, I'm sorry, that Kevin, so long. If we don't get a fire started soon, we won't just freeze, we will be sitting in complete darkness. Unless you want to run what few batteries we have left out lighting the cabin, and keeping warm with those tiny lamps of your flashlights, Ron complained again, miming a shiver. Here, Ron, if you're so scared of the dark, you can borrow me and Sally's flashlight, Adrian muttered from behind the group, handing the flashlight to Dorothy, who handed it to her husband.
We saw which way he went when we headed down to the dock. I didn't think he would have gone far just to chop up some wood, Harry said. Did he say anything to anyone about what his exact plan was? Harry asked.
Not that I heard. He was too busy threatening me like you had about getting answers, Tom said. I don't want to make my sister mad, but maybe Sally Ann might know something, Adrian offered from her spot against the wall. But why in the blazes would your sister have any idea about what Kevin... Oh, I see, Ron said. Oh, well, I think it's just fine, a couple youngsters finding a love connection at the end of the world, Dorothy added.
Okay, any lead will do. If she doesn't know anything, then we will need to go out after him regardless of the storm. We can't just leave him out there, Harry said. Adrian, would you mind asking Sally to come out here?
Of course, no problem. I'll be right back, Adrian said, and went back down the hallway towards the room her and her sister had been cleaning earlier. She came to the door and turned the knob, and realized it was locked. She knocked on it. Sal's, hey, I think you accidentally locked the door. Open up, Kevin's not back yet, and we're getting worried, she called. There was no answer. Sally Ann, you open this door now. This is no time for a nap. Still no answer. Adrian began banging on the door. The noise drew the attention of the others, and they all joined Adrian at the bedroom door, minus Ron and Dorothy, who were still making sure the kitchen chairs didn't fly away.
What's going on? Harry asked.
I don't know. The door was locked and she's not answering, Adrian said in a slightly panicked tone. Do you guys feel that? Janine asked, and put her hands up along the door frame. There's a really cold breeze. I know it's cold as shit in here, but that's a breeze. Was there an open window? No, it was closed, Adrian answered. Well, why in the world would she open the window? Tom asked. I don't know. Sally, open the door! Adrian yelled, banging on it.
Watch out,
Harry barked. Everyone backed away, and he reared back his foot and kicked hard at the strike plate. The door easily swung open from the force of Harry's kick and the old age of the wood. The room was empty. The far window was indeed open, and snow had been blowing into the room for no telling how long. It littered the floor and beds near the window. Then Adrian saw what else was on the floor: Sally Ann's sweater and bra. Adrian ran across the room to the window, sticking her head out of it. "Sally! Kevin! Are y'all out there? This isn't funny. It's too cold!" she yelled. "Let me shine some light on this matter," Tom said as he stepped up to the window and turned on his flashlight, shining it out into the late evening as the storm had begun to hit in full force. The snow was falling so hard that even with the flashlight lit, it was hard to see more than a couple feet ahead. He tried shining the light up, to the left, and to the right, but didn't see a thing, until he shined the flashlight down and saw several bright red drops of what appeared to be blood atop the bright white snow, leading off into the dark, and slowly being covered by the fresh powder falling from the dark sky above them. "Tell you what, let's all regroup and maybe we can think of a plan to..." Tom began to say after suddenly shutting his flashlight off at the sight of the blood, but he was cut off by Adrian. "What is it? What did you see?" Adrian demanded. "Nothing. Let's all go back to the main room," Tom said, while slowly walking back towards the door of the bedroom. "Here, let me look," Mark said, as he and his dad began stepping forward with Mark's flashlight and shining it out the window onto the ground, illuminating the blood. Adrian saw it and almost fell over. She wanted to scream, but her knees had failed her. She began to fall and Mark caught her. "Dad! Tom! Help me!" Mark said. Harry stepped forward and helped pull Adrian up. Mark shined his light around, but Tom was nowhere to be seen. Mark and Harry helped Adrian back to the main room. Janine followed. "What in the devil was all that racket?" Ron demanded. "Is everybody okay?" Dorothy asked. "No, not at all," Harry barked. Mark shined the flashlight straight at Tom, who was standing by the fireplace near the large window that ran the length of the main room. "Where'd you go, Senator?" Mark asked. "Start talking, Tom. What do you know? Why did you try to hide what you saw, and why the hell did you run away back in here?" Harry demanded. It's not possible. It's just not possible," Tom was muttering. "What's not possible?" Janine asked. Adrian's eyes lit up and she looked up at the senator. "His backpack, Harry! There's a folder in his backpack! Get it!" she yelled. Harry didn't even think twice. He saw the senator's pack sitting by the fireplace a couple feet from the senator himself. He crossed the room and reached for it. Tom grabbed hold of one strap and Harry grabbed the other. "You won't understand, Harry," Tom said. "Let go now or so help me, Tom," Harry stated. Mark turned off his flashlight and snuck up behind the senator and put him in a full Nelson, causing Tom to automatically let go of the pack. Mark turned the flashlight back on as Harry opened the pack and rummaged through it and found a folder marked OP-CL-JV. Harry removed it from the pack. Mark stepped next to his father and took the pack. He removed his own and put Tom's across his back for safekeeping. He then shone his light onto the folder in his father's hands.
"Well, isn't this interesting?"
Harry began. Tom slowly walked to the large window and stared out at the snowstorm in defeat. Harry opened the folder. The first thing he saw was a hand-drawn sketch of the wall around Crystal Lake. He then came to a folded blueprint of what was surely the plans for the walls and watchtowers. The next thing he came to was a set of newspaper articles covering the events from Jason's drowning to Pamela's killing spree to her decapitation. He found more articles where more slayings occurred, starting with the murder of the girl Alice, who had decapitated Pamela Voorhees after her killing spree. And in each article, the survivors claimed it was Jason Voorhees back from the dead who had killed their friends and family. There was a young boy who had supposedly killed Jason. His name was Tommy Jarvis. Then there was an article on a paramedic who had taken on the identity of Jason Voorhees in a copycat killing spree after his son had been murdered at a halfway house for troubled teens. Tommy Jarvis had been present for that series of deaths as well. Then there was articles about what witnesses say was Jason, once again back from the dead, killing a new set of counselors who had went back to work when the town had renamed itself to Forest Green and gave the camp its namesake. And yet again, there was the name Tommy Jarvis. Harry thought for a second about that graffiti they'd seen on the wall when they first got to it earlier that day. God, had it really been less than a day ago? It felt like they'd been here for days. But that graffiti, what had it said exactly?
"Rotten hell, maggot head,"
with the initials TJ. Harry was sure that TJ was Tommy Jarvis. Harry continued reading articles. Atina Shepard had claimed to have come against Jason years later and said Jason was surely dead. But then there were articles claiming witnesses saw a man in New York who fit Jason Voorhees' description, and a string of killings starting at Crystal Lake, which had been named back to Crystal Lake, and stretching all the way to New York. Harry leafed quickly through several pages of a mission by the FBI to try to capture Jason, and then he came to police reports and surveillance footage still images from Weston Hills Medical Center in Springwood, Ohio, that showed a large man who matched the description of Jason Voorhees over the years in all the newspaper articles as a large mountain of a man wearing a hockey mask. A string of killings began in Springwood, Ohio, and ended at Crystal Lake. There was a police report about the local PD and the county sheriff's department both responding to Crystal Lake after a large explosion and multiple murders, and this was just a few short years back. The reports continued and stated that Jason was thought to be dead when authorities responded to the explosion, and after bodies were recovered, including that of a long-dead child murderer, Fred Krueger, minus his head, which was never located, they ended up losing all officers and forensics techs on the scene, except one lone officer who got away and told the story of Jason slaying them all. And finally, Harry came to the piece de resistance of the entire OP-CL-JV folder. It was the plans to make Crystal Lake a large prison for Jason Voorhees. They didn't want to lose any more officers, yes, but a huge part of this plan was going to be the military and government agencies studying their prisoner, observing this Jason Voorhees and how he had survived for so many years and seemingly could regenerate over time. They had given up on trying to capture Jason and decided making him a prisoner in his own home and keeping civilians out of his home was the best way to save lives, and also study what they called a freak of nature. There were several more documents, but Harry had seen enough. He closed the folder and handed it to his son, who put it back in the senator's pack. Harry turned towards Senator Tom.
OP-CL-JV? Military jargon, my ass, Senator. Operation Crystal Lake Jason Voorhees,
Harry said. It's impossible. Don't you see? How could anyone believe any of that? Tom muttered.
Look around, Tom. People are missing. There's blood on the ground outside the bedroom window. The explosion and fire is mentioned in these goddamn papers, Harry stated.
Dad, what's going on? Who is Jason Voorhees? Janine asked. He's a lie made up by the military to build this place to get away with experiments, Tom said from the window. I didn't believe that supernatural nonsense then, and I don't believe it now. There is a logical explanation for all of this. The government is always lying to us. They claim to spend $5,000 on hammers, for Christ's sake, Tom pleaded, facing the group. Even Ron and Dorothy were now intrigued. What in the devil are you all on about? Ron asked from his chair.
The devil is right, Mr. Savinsky, Harry responded. Your buddy Tom here took us straight through the gates of hell and locked us in a giant cell with the devil himself, Harry answered.
Tom, I demand an explanation. I'll have you know I donated lots of money to your campaign over the years, and Dorothy and I Ron began before Tom cut him off. Oh my God, Ron, shut up. Money doesn't matter anymore. Have you still not figured that out? It's the end of the world, and I got all of you to a place where we are surrounded on all sides by a giant wall. We have a lake, fertile ground, trees, shelter, Tom said.
And a serial killer that can't be stopped who has killed hundreds by the looks of these stories, Harry said. A killer that even if you hurt him, he will just regenerate and keep on coming back.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Harry, regenerate? Do you hear yourself? It's all military misdirection to waste money while they play with toys. For the last time, there is no Jason Voorhees. It just isn't possible. Before Tom could finish his rant, he was cut off by a loud crashing noise as the large window at the front of the cabin behind him exploded into broken glass and something landed in the floor in front of the fireplace. Mark shined the light down to see the topless body of Sally Ann with a huge gaping bloody hole where her left eye used to be. Adrian immediately screamed and fell at her dead sister's side crying. Mark shined the light up at the window, and the entire group saw him now. Jason Voorhees stood tall, his weathered hockey mask glowing in the light of the flashlight, his hatred and fury radiating from his eyes that stared at them all in bloodlust. Steam rose off of his clothing as he began to climb through the window into the cabin. Chaos ensued. The two chairs that Ron and Dorothy had been holding down all evening finally found themselves empty as the older couple opened the front door a few feet away from them and ran for their lives into the -0 temperature of the snowstorm that was pummeling Camp Crystal Lake. Harry grabbed his son and daughter's hands and yanked them backwards and out the back door. They took a sharp left into the snowy darkness. Senator Tom turned on his flashlight and shone it on Jason. He still could not believe it was all true. He only kept it a secret from everyone because he didn't want the group to fall for the bullshit and give up a good thing and choose to leave the safety of the walls around Crystal Lake. It couldn't be true. It wasn't possible. It was like Roswell and Area 51, conspiracy bullshit. But now Tom was facing this conspiracy bullshit, and it was flesh and blood, and it was staring at him. The only thing between Jason and Tom was Sally Ann's corpse and her twin sister Adrian, who was kneeling beside her, holding her hand, trying to wake her up as if she didn't have a massive hole in her head. Tom backed up slowly and almost fell out the back door. He finally snapped into survival mode and went down the back stairs into the snow. He ran to the right, but in his panic had forgotten what his chore had been earlier that very evening. He had offered to dig the latrine pit, and dig it he had, 3 feet deep and 4 foot by 4 foot circumference. And with the snow falling so hard and fear pulsing through his body, he didn't think for a second about the pit and stepped right into it, snapping his ankle to the side so hard his leg bone broke through the skin, and he fell into the latrine pit on his side. The pain exploded in his leg and rose. He vomited immediately. He tried to pull himself up, but the moment he moved his leg, the pain hit him again, harder, and he fell over onto his back, and everything went dark as he passed out. Jason watched as the people in the cabin ran off into the night in different directions. No matter. They were in his home, and he would find them all, and he would kill them all. For himself, for Mother. Jason looked down at the exact copy of his last kill, except this one was wearing all her clothes. Jason cocked his head to one side. He had seen twins before. He had killed twins before. But this girl knew he was standing behind her, and she wasn't running. She wasn't screaming. She was holding the dead hand of Jason's last victim and was crying. If she expected mercy, there would be none. "Sally Ann, I can't do this without you. I can't. Wonder Twins, remember?" Adrian cried as she spoke softly, hearkening back to their childhood days when they would call upon the power of the Wonder Twins as they ran around their yard and played the summers and evenings away. But their running days were now over. Sally Ann was gone. Adrian knew that now, and she felt defeated. Her will to run and save her own life was gone. Without her parents, without her twin sister who she considered her other half, what was the point? She bent over and kissed her sister on the cheek and said, "Goodbye." Jason had seen enough. He reached down and took hold of Adrian's red hair and pulled her to her feet. He spun her around to face him. He stared deep into her eyes in the darkening room as snow blew in from outside. Jason eyed something near them hanging high next to the fireplace. It was the mounted head of a large buck deer with a huge 14-point rack. Jason sent all of his rage and anger through his eyes into Adrian's, and though she had lost the will to live, lost the will to fight, lost the will to run, she was suddenly filled with fear like she had never felt in her life. Her leg and pants became wet as her urine let go. Her body shook. Her eyes were locked with Jason's, and as much as she wanted to be brave, all she felt was fear. Not fear of death, but just pure, unfiltered fear. She still felt the fear as Jason took her by her shoulders and hoisted her into the air. She felt the fear as pain exploded through her back and chest. She felt the fear as Jason let go of her, but she still seemed to be held 3 feet off the floor. She felt the fear as she looked down and saw the horns of a deer protruding through her chest and blood pouring to the floor. She felt the fear as her lungs filled with that blood and breathing became harder and harder to accomplish. She felt the fear as she watched Jason walking away from her into the darkness towards the back door. And she felt the fear as everything in her vision seemed to get further and further away. And she felt the fear as darkness engulfed her. And then she feared no more. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been chapters 3 and 4 of my original story, Friday the 13th Quarantine. I really had a blast writing these 2 chapters and taking the story forward a little bit, from taking us back outside the walls to see that the horde is getting bigger and they are intent on getting inside these walls, and then taking us deeper into this story with the Senator, what he knew about Crystal Lake, because I'm finding this out at the same time you are, folks. I'm sitting down. I've got a basic outline of the story, but until I sit down to actually type it out, I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be. So it's a lot of fun for me, too, because this story is coming out, and I'm presenting it to you. I hope you enjoyed the kills tonight. We lost both of the twins, Adrian and Sally Ann. I did that poll about if a Friday the 13th story needs a sex scene or not. And I decided to kind of meet in the middle of not doing one and doing one. And that's what you got with Sally Ann and Kevin's little backstory and her little striptease at the window for, I guess, Jason, who I guess was throwing pebbles at the window to get her attention. But I thought the kills went great. I had a lot of fun writing them. And I should probably see a psychiatrist for making that statement. I hope that it wasn't lost in translation, because sometimes the time of the story jumps around a little bit. Like when chapter 3 started, we were with Harry and his kids as they were leaving to go check out the docks back in chapter 2. So they saw Kevin as he was leaving to go cut wood before he got killed. Something similar happens when Harry shows up after seeing where Freddy vs. Jason took place at the dock and everything, and he's confronting Tom. The twins are in the back room. They hear him yelling. Adrian says she's going to go out there and listen. Sally Ann stays behind. Of course, Sally Ann dies. But then when we get back out in the main room, we're actually rewinding to before Sally Ann died, and Adrian's just now leaving the room. So while that argument is really intensifying, and Tom is explaining the first part of the Crystal Lake project and leaving out Jason, that is the period where Sally Ann is being killed in the room while we're experiencing that scene. I'm sure it wasn't lost in translation. I think I made it pretty clear in the writing. But yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed these 2 chapters. I put a lot into them. The story's advancing pretty fast. We've probably only got 2-3 chapters left, plus an epilogue. I've got a hell of a couple more kills planned for you, and a hell of an ending, and I hope you're all going to stick around to check that out. I hope the story's keeping your attention and keeping you entertained. I hope I didn't go too sad with the twins' death. I hope you liked all the little references tonight, because, we had Tommy Jarvis thrown in there. We went through a big timeline of things that happened in the Friday the 13th films. I kind of skated over the Jason Goes to Hell stuff because it doesn't really attach to this universe's timeline, in my story's opinion anyways. But I did give it a mention with the FBI mission thing he kind of skips through. I'm sure that a lot of you Return of the Living Dead fans caught that Tarman killed Harry's wife. Tarman terrified me as a kid. Terrified me. To this day, just looking at him is kind of like, ugh. I hope you enjoyed, let's see here, Harry finally laying into Tom, the group finding out about Jason, Jason showing up and everybody running off in their different directions. The senator's passed out in the latrine pit. Good thing nobody used it yet. But, he's laying out there passed out, and Jason's on his way out there. So, when Chapter 5 rolls around, we're going to have to address that, aren't we? And, yeah, let me know what you all thought about the twins' deaths tonight. From the icicle to the eye, to Adrian being hung up on the antlers of a deer on the wall. And, yeah, I would really appreciate feedback and what you all think of the story so far. If you're enjoying it, not liking it, what you did like about it. And I love to talk to y'all about it. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you in the comments section. And I'll be back soon with more of this story. I'll be writing chapters 5 and 6 probably over the next couple days. And I'll get either chapter 7 done or the epilogue done. We'll see how fast it comes together. But I cannot wait to share the rest of the story with you and the ending I have planned. I think you're going to really like it. I hope you like Freddy's mention tonight, that his body was retrieved from the lake before Jason killed all the forensic people and the cops that came out to investigate the events of Freddy vs. Jason, and that Jason kept the head and put it on a pike somewhere in Crystal Lake. Who knows, that head might pop up again somewhere in the story. Not making any promises, but not saying it's not possible. Please consider supporting the channel through Patreon, or by buying a Cameo video, or donating through PayPal or Cash App. The channel cannot be monetized, so I literally can only fund the channel through amazing slashaholics like you listeners. All the information to help out the channel that way is in the description below. Be excellent to each other. Have a great weekend. And always remember, the sun never sets on those who ride into it. We'll see you soon.